This video is using order of operations to simplify. Remember, when simplifying in math, order matters. First thing you're going to do is complete things that have parentheses or grouping symbols. That could be brackets as well, working from the inside out. Next, you'll go through and complete all exponents. Third, you will go through and complete multiplication and division. This is all one step and from the left to the right. We don't do multiply first and then divide. It's from left to right. And then the last thing you're going to do is any adding and subtracting from left to right. Let's look at an example. In this example, I don't see any parentheses or grouping symbols. I also do not see any exponents. So we're moving on to multiplying and dividing from left to right. It looks like we have one place with some division, so that's where we're going to start. So inside of that box that I just drew, 15 divided by 5 is the first thing we're going to do. Now nothing else is going to change. So I'll rewrite everything outside of the box. And then go ahead and complete the part that's inside that box, 15 divided by 5, which is 3. That completes the end of our multiplying and dividing, so now we're on to adding and subtracting. And remember, we always do this from left to right. So the first thing I would do is this 9 plus 1. So that's going to give me 10. Now everything outside of the box is just going to get rewritten. We're not going to tackle that yet. And then last, we can do 10 minus 3, and there is your simplified expression at the number 7. Let's look at example 2. I see some parentheses here. They're acting like grouping symbols, and they are grouping this 6 minus 3 together. So the first thing we're going to do is 6 minus 3. Now nothing else is going to change, so we're just going to rewrite everything else. Now remember, when 2 is written next to those parentheses, that means multiply. So we're going to have some multiply here in a minute. But before we do that multiplication, I see one thing that's going to happen before it, because the next step in order of operations after parentheses is exponents. So we're going to need to do that first. Now remember, outside of the box, everything just gets rewritten. Now those parentheses that we had a second ago, these guys right in here, they were grouping this together, and then they were telling us that the thing inside of that group got that exponent of 3. Now that we're taking care of grouping these and the exponent, we don't need those parentheses anymore. But remember, those parentheses were telling us 2 times whatever we got in the parentheses. 3 to the third power, remember what that means. That's 3 times 3 times 3, or 9 times 3 for 27. So this is going to now be a 27. Next, after we've done parentheses and grouping symbols, we've done exponents, we're on to multiply and divide, and I see I have a multiply. So that's going to be my next step. The negative 7 is going to stay the same. And then 2 times 27, that's going to be 54. Last but not least, I'm going to take negative 7 plus 54. Now remember, on your calculator, a lot of them have 2 different buttons for this. There's a minus sign and a negative sign. So make sure you're clicking the right button for that negative sign. If you've done it correctly, you should be getting 47. Let's look at one last example. Now you'll notice in this one, we have a lot of grouping symbols. We have grouping symbols over here, I have grouping symbols over here, and these brackets are also grouping symbols. So this first step is kind of complicated because there's a lot going on. This set of grouping symbols is fairly isolated and just kind of hanging out, so we can kind of tackle those whenever they're kind of on their own. But these guys are connected. And remember, when we're doing grouping symbols, we're working from the inside out. So before I tackle these brackets, I'm going to start on the inside with these grouping symbols. Now inside of the grouping symbols, we've got addition, and exponents. Whenever you have multiple things going on inside the grouping symbols, you're going to follow order of operations inside of the parentheses. So the first thing we would do here is not the addition, but the exponent, because exponent comes before add. Now, everything else we're just going to kind of leave alone for right now, just take care of that exponent. So I'm just going to rewrite everything. And the only thing we're going to change is the stuff that's in that red box. And 2 times 2 is 4. And there we are. Now I've still got stuff inside those grouping symbols. So again, the next thing we're going to do is take care of the rest of that. Everything else is going to stay put. Now, in this step, 9 plus 4 is going to give me that 13, but that's like the end of those grouping symbols. There's nothing else to do there, so we can go ahead and get rid of those parentheses now and just write it as 13 without the parentheses. Next, we could do actually a couple things here. Remember we talked about this set of parentheses, or this grouping symbol here. It's kind of just all by itself with one little thing to do. So I think I'm going to go ahead and tackle this because it's kind of all out here by itself. And then I'm also going to go ahead and look inside this set of grouping symbols. And remember, we've got a couple things going on. We have to follow order of operations still. I'm going to have to do this exponent before the subtract. So along with that grouping symbol out front, we're going to go ahead and do this 5 squared. Sorry, this is starting to look like a mess. This 5 minus 3 is 2. And inside these brackets, I now have 5 squared. So 5 times 5, or 25, minus 13. Now, if you don't like the brackets, you can switch them to parentheses. Typically, we use the brackets like we did up here because there were parentheses on the inside, but not everybody does. You could still put parentheses here and that'd be okay. Next, still working on finishing up these grouping symbols, so I'm going to do 25 minus 13. Now, that's the end of these grouping symbols, so we don't need them anymore. I've got the 2 out here, and inside the grouping symbols became 12, but my answer isn't 212. Remember, when you have the number right here next to a grouping symbol, what that really means is multiplication. You can write it like that, or if you want to, you can keep the parentheses because this means the same thing. Either way, your final answer should be 24.